Recording. Okay, so anyway, welcome today. Today what we're going to be discussing is a very interesting topic. It's about refuting irrational thoughts. And the idea or the concept that we're getting to is to understand when we have these irrational thoughts and what that means as far as how we then let me think, how can I say this? What we then do with these thoughts, meaning we have a thought and then we have an emotion from it and then how we react to it. So really what we're trying to do is understand that when we have, a lot of distressing thoughts, when we have a lot of, kind of dark in here, so I'm gonna make it brighter. When we have a lot of feelings that we are dealing with, and then how it then manifests itself into our physical life. So the distressing thoughts that we have can cause, emotional and psychological, physical symptoms. And the idea is, okay, let's recognize it, let's understand, let's break it down, and then figure out how to counteract it. So for anybody who's ever, just had thoughts that you thought, these thoughts aren't helpful, I wish I could stop having those thoughts. If you've had thoughts that you think can be very distressing, if you have thoughts that you feel are, making you quite unhappy, and you wish that, that these thoughts would stop, the idea is to understand, okay, how can I change that? What can I do in order to recognize that and change it? So let's talk about that. So the first thing is that we have this understanding of our self-speak, which we've talked about before. And most of what occurs in our life comes from the idea of what we're speaking to ourselves, what our understanding is of the things that are happening around us. So an event happens and then we react to it. And our reaction is mostly based on the thoughts that we have around this event, right? So there are things that we might tell ourselves in relation to relationships. It might be things such as people saying, oh, I can't survive if I'm alone, or I'm never going to meet anyone, or anything that starts with this idea of should or could or never. All these sort of things become then a thought process, become then experience that we have that becomes our reality. And most of these thoughts that we have are actually very much based in an irrational or a misconception. And on two parts, we have misconceptions, and we have perfectionist tendencies. So misconceptions are the things that we feel that we think might be real, especially fearful thoughts. So you're on a plane and there's a bit of turbulence and your first thought is like, oh my God, the wing's gonna fall off. That's a misconception, that's generally not going to be what's happening. On the other hand, you have things such as perfectionist feelings, and those perfectionist feelings are, I should have done that, I could, I must do that, I have to do these things, I can never do that. This idea that we can't make mistakes, that we have to be perfect in some way. And these two sides of irrational thinking causes so much stress in our life. It causes us to have a lot of emotional and physical disruption in our being because we believe these things to be true. And it makes a pressure on our system. And so there was, in the 1960s, there was a fellow by the name of Albert Ellis, and he began a system that's called, I'm trying to remember what it's called, I think it's called Counteract Irrational Ideas, and it's all about replacing them with realistic statements. It's rational emotive therapy, that's what it's called. So the rational emotive therapy is what we can implement ourselves. What I'm going to try and express with you today, I'm going to show you two different ways of dealing with it. And the principle is basically that whatever emotions we're having, have absolutely nothing to do with the event that has occurred. So something happens and it just exists in its pure, natural, true form. A thing happens, and then for us, whatever feelings we are then getting from that, whatever emotions we are then having from it, in actuality, is not coming from the event or the thing that happened, but rather it's coming from this place of our own interpretation of it. Okay, so I hope that that makes sense when I'm saying it like that. So what I'm saying is, we have something occurring, whatever the event is, has no connotation to it, negative, positive, it doesn't matter. We only are assigning that to it. So a thing happens, and then from there we are then having a thought about it, right? That's our self-speak, our thought about it, whether it's a perfectionist thought or a misconception thought, and then that creates the emotions. And so whether we want to believe it or not, the thoughts that we choose to spend time on are the thoughts that we want to believe or we direct is caused by ourselves. And so therefore, when we have an expression, a feeling of anxiety or depression or worry or anger even, these are all emotions that are being caused because of a thought that happens between the event and the emotion. So event doesn't happen and then suddenly we have an emotion. There is that period in between where we have the thoughts about it. And so one of the ways we understand, especially why we have these thoughts or what happened, can be anything from our childhood, can be anything from experiences we've had in our adulthood, but generally it begins in a very young stages of our childhood development, where we are discovering about the world. And as things happen, we create, as we've talked about before in other sessions, we create this filter, right? And this filter becomes the filter that exists within us, that filters everything we hear, everything we see, everything we taste, everything we smell. Everything passes through that filter, right? So I can smell something and go, oh my gosh, that reminds me of my father's aftershave, right? Because that's my filter. I'll remember that. Or someone else can smell it and say, doesn't mean anything to me. I can hear somebody, talking, and maybe they say a word and it reminds me of something that happened, and I equate it back to something from my childhood, right? You see something, somebody talks to you a certain way, and then we have what people nowadays call triggers, right? We have triggers because these are things that we've associated with things that have happened to us in our lives and now are reoccurring. Things that have happened later on in our life tend to be expressions or reproductions of things that have happened before when we were children. So if we have, let's say, a parent in our life who was very critical or who was very emotionally unavailable, if we haven't dealt with that correctly, which is very unusual to do in a young age, then chances are by the time we get into new relationships, whether they're friendships or romantic relationships or even work relationships, we'll tend to gravitate towards people who will treat us that same way again because we haven't resolved it. It's a karmic clearing that hasn't occurred yet. We haven't resolved that challenge. We haven't learned it. And so we're going through the process of continuing to learn that. And so because of this, we have again these emotions, these thoughts that come up because it reminds us of experiences that we've had. And even though we feel like the whole point is, oh my gosh, let me get away from that experience and let me bring into my life somebody who's going to be different and not treat me that way, we tend not to do that until we've learned the lesson. So we'll find people over and over again that will remind us of not always the best relationships that we've had until we've learned the lesson from it and we can now absolve ourselves of it. Does that make sense so far? Everybody's with me, right? Okay. So understanding that an event happens, there's a self-talk, and then there's emotion that occurs from it. So even to the point of when somebody says something and you want to say, when you say that, you make me so angry, is not actually what they've said in terms of the universe that's made us angry. What's made us angry is they said something, and that thing has been then translated into our brain through our filter and our self-speak, and now I'm angry about it. And sometimes it can be a misconception. Sometimes it can be very clearly what the person has said, but we've attracted this into our life and we don't want to. And sometimes it can go against a perfectionist feeling. So let's break it down a little bit more. So imagine there's a painter, okay? And the painter he's doing his job, he's painting a house, and he's painting it for this woman. She comes along and she says, you know what? I don't think you've done a good job. I'm not happy with it. And, you know, she might point out certain things that she feels is not to her standard. So she says, I'm not happy with the paint job. We've got to figure something out. Now, the question is, how does the painter then deal with this? Okay, so something has happened and she's expressed her thought about it. She said, I've created an event. An event is, I am unhappy and I need you to resolve it. So he may then take this event and then think about it and say, for example, you know what? She's a miserable old coot. Nothing I ever do ever makes her happy. He might say, you know what? Why do I always make mistakes like this? You know, why am I always challenged like this? He might say, why am I always getting involved with clients who are unhappy? Or he might even say, I'm just not good at my job. Maybe I should, you know, stop and find something else to do. So this is a self-talk, right? I've had this self-talk as an event has occurred, and now emotions are going to follow that. So what are the emotions I feel when I say things like that? Maybe I feel angry at her because she's, you know, critiquing my work. Maybe I feel sad because I feel like I'm not able to get a break. This is again a misconception. Why is this always happening to me? Maybe I feel less worth because I feel like I'm not a good painter. I can't do a good job. So all of these emotions have come away from an experience, but only because there's been a self-talk in between. So I hope that this helps a little bit to break down, to understand that all the emotions that are arising from situations are passing through a self-talk in our brain in order to get there. And so what we have to focus on is changing that self-talk, changing how we then view these things that occur, so that we can instead have a much better experience. So, you know, looking at this and understanding the situation, we think about what is the root of the irrational thinking. And in most cases, people feel like these are external factors that are happening. People feel like, okay, it's something outside of me that's happening that's causing me this distress. And it can feel very, very evident of that because you see things that are happening around you and it's causing, you know, distress to you. And because of that, we recognize and we look around and we see, okay, so there's things that are happening right now. We have, you know, a pandemic going on. You know, I have many clients who are in Lebanon right now. There was an explosion and their families are in trouble. There's, you know, people who have lost their jobs. There's all kinds of situations that are happening. And again, these are real events that are happening. But the question is, how do I interpret that? What do I do with that? And as we look at the things that are happening and how we have up until now interpreted, we may understand that the way we have been interpreting it is not the most helpful for us, is not the best for us. And this is a situation where we are understanding that things that have happened have become part of let's say, a self-speak that we've continued on, that we've had for a very long time. Something we may have heard, for example, from people in our family, but something we may have heard, for example, from things that we've learned from our childhood, we've seen other people say, or we've heard it over and over again. It's become what we have as a belief now in our system because it's something that we've heard. Anything as simple as, oh, money doesn't grow on trees, money's difficult to get. So this becomes part of our reality because it's something that we've heard and it's become part of our belief system. We may have been around somebody who is doesn't like to be alone, or is fearful of being lonely, or been raised by a parent who maybe have been very dependent on somebody, or maybe non-existent. Whatever those things are, we look at it and this now becomes part of our belief system. So we see that and we say, oh, it's bad to be alone. Money's hard to get. You can't survive by yourself. Whatever the events are, whatever the things that are happening, we see it, it goes into the filter of our brain, and now it sits there. It doesn't mean we can't clear it out. We absolutely can. But it is first a recognition of what those self-speak is, so that we can now change it, so we don't have to get to those emotions. So a thing happens, the self-speak and then the emotion. If I can change that self-speak in the middle, I never have to have that emotion. I don't have to get to a place of anger or depression or worry or fear, because I've changed the speech in between. So when we find ourselves engaging in these behaviors, we recognize that there can be two extremes. One extreme is the catastrophic thinking, right? You may know people in your life who are like this. They have all of a sudden a little tingle in their arm for a second and they go, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. Like that's it. They've gone from A to Z in 2 seconds. It's just absolutely catastrophic, I had a friend and something would happen. She'd have a pain in her finger and she would say, do you think it's a tumor? I mean, all the time. It's like, why are we jumping to that? But that's catastrophic thinking. You have an event and then right away you've gone to the worst place. The other thing, again, as I talked about before, is in absolutes. Thinking in absolutes. It's sort of like a perfectionist. And absolutes are when we're saying like, I have to do it this way. We must do this way. I never should do that. And if we put that kind of pressure on ourselves, what we are creating is an unrealistic expectation. An unrealistic expectation that we're not going to be able to live up to. And so we will find ourselves in a constant state of disappointment, whether it's us or other people who we place these expectations on. And I'm sure all of you have at some point been very disappointed by people around you who have not lived up to expectations that you've held. And in many cases, this is something that we hold to be true. It's something that we may do, but we find the other person does not. And so we're disappointed by them. And then we feel hurt and angry and depressed and sad. Not to say that we shouldn't feel disappointed if somebody's not behaving in the way that we would like them to, but how much of that we take on to ourselves and then allow our energy and allow our emotions to be brought down, that's the choice that we have to make. So I want to talk about a little bit how we then judge this. Okay, so there's some rules that we're going to go through that I'm going to explain about how you can best really understand, because sometimes it's very blurry. It's hard to know because we feel, in a lot of cases, well, shouldn't I be angry? Like, shouldn't I be upset? This person is doing something that's unfair. And I get that. But the problem or the challenge in this is, as soon as I'm upset and I'm hurt and I'm sad or I'm angry, I've just given my power away to someone else because of that event, because I've allowed it to bring me to that place of emotion. And so we want to avoid that so that we can be in the place we want to be, in the place of peace, in the place of happiness, in the place of joy, and not allow someone else's behavior or something else that has occurred to bring us down to those lower energies. Make sense so far what I'm saying? Everybody clear? This is a hard topic. Okay. So one thing I want to mention as we go through this is there is a point where, after the class, there is, if anybody is interested, just let me know and I will send you. There's actually a really, really great workbook, I want to call it. We call it a belief inventory. And there's something on here, I'm just taking a look at it. There's like 100 questions, okay? And if you want to, I can send anybody who's interested in these 100 questions that you can fill out for yourself, and then you can see where you lie along this belief inventory, you know, where you are in the realistic or the irrational ideas, and what sort of things you might want to be able to shift from that. And included also is a homework sheet. It's like a little worksheet where you can look at the events and then take a look at the steps as I'm going to explain to you now, and use that to help analyze each event. So if anyone is interested, just, you know, to let me know later or text me so I don't forget, and I'll send this off to you so you can take a look at it. And I think it's very, very interesting when you analyze for yourself. It's 100 questions, so it take a little bit of time. I mean, if you do it by yourself, tick, 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 it's okay. But if we sat during the course, it would take up more than the whole time. Okay, so let's talk about the irrational ideas, this assessment. So before I get into how to analyze it. So first thing are some beliefs, okay? And there are 10 basic irrational ideas that Ellis, the person I was talking about from the 60s, who had set up, and these are the ones that he talks about that are like the highly unrealistic and irrational thoughts that we have. And so I'm just going to list some of these, and I want you to think about for yourself if these are things that you might hold to be true. So for example, number one is it is an absolute necessity for an adult to have love and approval from peers, family, and friends. So this can kind of be misconstrued as this idea of trying to please all the people in your life. And if you find yourself being a person who's trying to make other people happy all the time, this will be one of those very large irrational beliefs that will lead to unhappiness. Because there's a part of us that believes, you know, I need to make all these people around me happy. It's my responsibility to make people happy, these people. And if we believe in that, and we feel that to be a truth, this is a place that is a very dangerous self-talk that will bring us a lot of unhappiness. Second one is, you must be unfailingly competent and almost perfect in anything you do. I have to be perfect. I cannot fail. I have to do this well. So in this case, again, we're putting ourselves in a position to just automatically lower our self-esteem when we don't reach the goal of having everything done to perfection. You know, is one thing. A lot of times we find ourselves saying to others, well, you did the best you could. But when it comes to ourselves, we're beating ourselves up saying, you know, why didn't I do that better? Why didn't I do that perfectly? Number three, certain people are evil, wicked, villainous, and should be punished. And to say those things kind of implies that there is, for the most part, people are choosing this behavior. And I think that if we come down to the understanding that a lot of times people they're acting in a way that's antisocial, inappropriate, or wrong, but it can be from the fact that they're just stupid or ignorant or neurotic, you know, from their upbringing, you know, something. And when I say ignorant, I mean in the sense that they're just absolutely ignorant that this is incorrect behavior, and they've been taught that and continue to be taught that. And it's difficult not to get upset because we feel this is being done to us, but we realize that that person is engaging in behavior that they might not even recognize is as bad as we may feel it to be. Number four, it's horrible when people and things are not the way you would like them to be. I think we've all engaged in this. You know, why can't people just behave the way we want them to be? Why can't they just do what they want to be? Why can't things just work out the way it should, right? And, you know, a lot of times what happens is there's an intense irritation and stress caused from this because we can meet this situation with a lot of catastrophic thinking, right? It's just horrible when things go this way, like, you know, life isn't fair, and why do these things always happen to me, and why am I the one who's suffering from this? And so in that sense, again, this is one of those self-beliefs that like, this is happening to me alone. I am special or out of the ordinary, and these things are occurring and are hurting me. And again, it's a self-speak. It's a self-speak. A thing can happen and it just happens. And it's not to say that we don't have feelings about it, but we're choosing the kinds of feelings we're going to have about it. And if we're going to make it worse by believing it to be something that in some way it's like we're being punished for. Why do these things keep happening to me over and over again? It's not punishment. It's a situation that is occurring. External events cause most human misery. People simply react as events trigger their emotions. So when you say external events are causing misery and I'm reacting to a trigger, what I'm basically saying is everything outside is making me feel this way. It's not me, it's all those things. If these things weren't happening, I wouldn't feel this way. We're literally saying that the external is causing me this pain. And if we feel that way, we can end up getting to a place of helplessness and anxiety, because the solution to this belief would be, I have to change all the external factors. And think about that. We can't. I have to change how that other person is behaving. I have to change if that thing is happening or not. I have to make this thing not occur or occur. That's a power beyond what any of us have. The only thing we have control over, right, is ourselves, what we're thinking, what we're doing. So an irrational thought might be something that external events or external behaviors are now causing me a misery and pain. And so the solution becomes, I have to change those external events. I have to get this person to behave a different way. I have to make this thing stop happening. And so as we understand that this is not what's causing our unhappiness, or that we have very, very limited control over that, then the only thing we can focus on are emotions about it. This person can behave this certain way, and I can choose if I'm going to let that upset me or not. It's got to be my choice at this point, because the opposite of me changing the other person, that's not going to happen. But being able to remove that from that thought process. Number 6, you should feel fear or anxiety about anything that is unknown, uncertain, or potentially dangerous. Again, when I say it like that, it sounds ridiculous, because nobody's sitting there saying, yes, you should feel fearful about the unknown, but we do. So many of us, that's part of our belief system, this irrational thought that I should feel fearful of things that I don't know. So people will say something happens, and now something kicks in that I should start to worry about it. And when I worry about it, these unknowns, that's just an invitation again to catastrophize. I don't know what's going to happen, but the first thing I'm going to think of is the absolute worst case scenario. It's very rare that people who fear the unknown think about the best possible solution. They're usually going to think about what the absolute worst thing is that could possibly happen. And so this makes it very difficult to cope with, because a lot of times what I experience, especially with my clients, you may feel this too, is that when you have an unknown situation and you're fearful about the outcomes, you present to your mind all the possible worst case scenarios, and then you start rehearsing your plan of how you're going to deal with it. Oh, I'll do this if this happens, I'll do this if that happens. And now you're just rehearsing these scenarios, which I will guarantee you are never going to do whatever it is you're imagining in that moment. Even if you think about the amount of conversations in your head you've had that you've said, I'm going to talk to this person about this, and I'm going to tell them X, Y, Z. I'm going to have all this conversation. And then you get to that point where you meet the person, you go to have the conversation, and you don't say half the things you thought you were going to say, or you don't say them the way you were going to say. Because we can never predict the events of the future, how the other person's going to react, where I'm going to be, what I'm going to be feeling. That person of the future is not the person I am now. So I can't possibly rehearse or plan out a future scenario, because I haven't gotten there yet. And I'm not in that moment. And I don't know what the other person is going to be saying. So again, this is the idea that we're increasing our fear and anxiety by feeling nervous about a situation that hasn't happened yet. So instead, we can save our fear response for something that may actually cause fear, rather than, rather than just living with an uncertainty that might be something new or something exciting. It's like I say to people, if it's your birthday and somebody's bought you some presents and it's closed and it's in a box and you haven't opened it, well, you may be unaware as to what those presents might be. But why not look at it and say, ooh, maybe it's something fabulous and exciting? Or do you look at it and say, oh, it's going to be something I hate, or maybe it's going to be a big pile of poop or something that's going to jump out and eat me? I mean, that's not a thought that comes into your head. You're thinking, oh, it's exciting. It's going to be something nice. I hope it is. And so we can have that same outlook of the future, of not allowing ourselves to be in that irrational thought that things that are unknown should be scary. Number 7, it's easier to avoid than to face life's difficulties or responsibilities. And this is a challenge I find with a lot of people, especially those who engage in addictive behaviors. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have to think about it. I'm just going to avoid everything as long as possible. People who don't want to get involved in, how can I say, like something that's a responsibility that somebody knows that they need to do, like searching for another job, or committing to a change that they need to do in their life, and therefore they need to take some action towards it, and then not doing it. A lot of times this happens because it feels like it's easier to be avoiding, as if you're not making a decision. But in reality, the choice to not do anything is a decision. And that is a choice that brings us, again, mostly from a place of fear of making the wrong decision, or fear of having to deal with that scenario. And so this may be one of those self-beliefs. It's better to just avoid it than deal with it at all. But as most things that we avoid and don't deal with, it doesn't actually just go away, but only grows and becomes worse. Number 8 is you need something stronger or greater than yourself to rely on. And sometimes we get into this psychological trap that we believe that that we're not capable of doing something independently, or that we need someone else who is smarter or better or stronger or whatever to help us deal with it. And so now we become reliant or dependent, or feel incapable, because there is a belief that there's something I can do and I must have someone else to do that. Now, I'm not talking about like lifting a couch by yourself up a set of stairs, but rather anything that is our own judgment, anything that we feel that we need to make decisions on, can sometimes feel that if we have this belief in our system that we need somebody else to do that, then we're setting ourselves up for a dependency, which again will create a negative emotion. I have 2 more. Number 9, the past has a lot to do with determining the present. And I hear that over and over again. Oh, yeah. Everything in the past. Like, I don't want to repeat it. I don't want to do this again. That's all about the present. But just because we have been affected by something so strongly in the past doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be a difficulty or a challenge in the future. When we see the old decisions that we've made, we can start making changes from that. And the most important thing that we get out of this, again, is to obviously learn from that, but to stay in this moment and move forward. The challenge that I have when people have this belief that the past is so important to determining the future is they find themselves living in the past, even projecting past experiences and behaviors onto new people in the future, in the present. People have had nothing to do with anything. So, for example, you have somebody, they were in a relationship and somebody cheated on them. So now, what do? And they're in a new present situation, and the person's on the phone. Who are you talking to? What are you doing? Where are you going? When are you coming back? All things that they may not have done previously, but because they've had this one experience, they're concerned about it. They don't want to feel it again. And now they're creating a new scenario. And what do you think happens to a person who has no intention of that, but is constantly being bombarded by somebody else's fear that they're going to do this? I can guarantee you that's not going to make that person very happy, because they're going to feel that they're being treated unfairly from something that they've never done. So it's so important that we release that and we understand that there can be past behaviors, but we should not project that into the future, nor should we stay in the past, because that's going to, again, keep those emotions alive and keep us in a very unhappy place if we keep replaying those memories of things that have happened before. And lastly, happiness can be achieved by inaction or passivity or endless leisure. And sorry?
I didn't hear.
Sorry, the last one is that happiness can be achieved by inaction or passivity. So they call this the Elysian Fields syndrome. And that feeling is that there are people who, again, without understanding that the happiness that we would like to have in our lives occurs from in ourselves, that our happiness comes from our own behavior and our happiness comes from our own decision making. Some people feel like, well, if I just sit and do nothing, or I don't deal with anything, or I'm just completely passive, I don't make any waves, I don't do anything, then I'll just be happy. I don't have to express my emotions, I don't have to fight for anything. Let me just, just kind of like in the beginning, make everyone happy, or just be quiet, and then I'll be happy. And then, again, this is a belief system that will bring us to, a very irrational thought that will not be helpful to us in the future. So those are some of the 10 basic ones that we find that have been discovered as irrational thoughts. And we may have a lot more on top of that. Of course, everybody, is unique and may be tapping into something different. So when we recognize and start to see that I do have beliefs that are irrational, that I have these feelings, these thoughts that if I go down that pathway are not going to bring me to a good place, how do I then counteract it? How do I then understand, okay, this is not a helpful thought, and then what do I do to stop it? Is one thing to just do symptomatically. We've talked about thought stopping techniques and other things where in the moment we try to come back to present, which we can do as a symptom resolver. But how do we get to the root cause of it? How do we break apart those and analyze those thoughts? So what we want to do is, first of all, there's 6 basic rules, okay? And this was also, I think it was in the 70s as well, David Goodman, he created this. And it's called Rational Behavior Training. So the first thing is, number 1, to say that this event that has happened, it doesn't do anything to me. The situation does not affect my emotion. I only say things to myself that can create emotion. So just like we said in the beginning, there's an event. And I look at the event and I have to say, okay, this event, this is not doing anything to me. It's not having an effect on me. Only if I decide that this is going to have an effect on me, it does. Somebody walks in the room and they say, you know what? You're a jerk. You're a piece of crap. I hate you. Now, you can say, well, clearly, why would I not feel angry or hurt or offended by this? But all of that comes from my own interpretation in that moment. I have to decide that that's going to be upsetting to me. I have to decide that I'm going to take that as something that either somewhere deep down in my core, I believe might be true, and so it triggers me and I feel upset by it. I might feel angry because I feel, who are you to speak those words to me? So again, this comes from an absolutism. Nobody should ever talk to me like that. And again, I'm not in any way saying that people should talk to you that way. Of course they shouldn't. But the question is, how upset am I going to get by it? Can I have somebody screaming at me and just look at them like, okay, are you done? Like, what is your point? And so a lot of times we recognize that there are things that will be upsetting to us because we somewhere are feeling a fear or recognition that this might be true. So when a person goes to a place, not necessarily using very bad words, but if somebody came up to me and they said, Dawn, you're just a really horrible example of a good Chinese woman, I would laugh. I'd be like, well, okay, I'm not Chinese. I don't have any Chinese blood in me. That's okay. It doesn't bother me. But if I was Asian, if I was Chinese and they said that, maybe I would then choose to be upset by it and say, what are you talking about? So it really is coming from understanding in the first place, saying, I have to be able to say, you know what is happening right now is not doing anything to me unless I choose to interpret it as such. I have to choose to decide. Go ahead, Don.
So if you're having a conversation with somebody and they say to you, that what you just said is very dumb, you can choose that that's not going to bother you?
What you said is dumb?
What?
Do you believe that what you said at any point is dumb?
It could have been.
If it is, does it upset you? Would you say, yeah, no, maybe you're right?
Which doesn't upset me.
I don't know, that's what I'm asking you. Like, okay, so somebody says, like, somebody's talking to you and they say, Don, you know what, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard.
That would upset me.
There's a reason why it's upsetting you. There's a choice in there to be upsetting you. Because again, you have to choose that what this person is saying is important enough or so much in my own belief system that I'm going to allow that to upset me.
So what's the rational thing to do?
First thing is to say, whatever they're saying, whatever they're doing, it doesn't affect me unless I choose to allow that thing to affect me. They can say all day long, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. I said, okay. For example, I had a conversation with somebody about a month ago, and they said to me, Earth is flat. 100% the Earth is flat. It is. It's not round. It's not a sphere. It's all a lie. It's all a myth, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I don't really hold that to be true because it's been proven for many, many hundreds of thousands of years that that's not true. And they said to me, well, you're just stupid. Now, I didn't get upset by that.
I wouldn't get upset by that either.
Yeah, because that I knew I was, but that's the point is the thing wouldn't upset you if you feel that what you're saying is right and correct and the other person is not in a place, well, no one ever should be in a place of judgment, but in that case, we're choosing, am I going to let that upset me? If you hold fast to your belief, what does it matter? What does it matter what another person is thinking or feeling about you unless you choose to say, you know what, it really matters to me that you are feeling that way. And even if it's somebody I care about, if I still feel that I'm in the right or I'm correct, then I'm going to say, okay, you know what, let's choose to disagree. Now, do we do this 100% of the time? Of course not. I would love to say I never have a disagreement with anyone. Of course we do. But this can alleviate a lot of that by deciding what I'm going to hold on to. Somebody may say something to us, and then we hold on to it. We get upset by it. We don't like talking to them anymore. Maybe we were holding a grudge. Maybe we're feeling miserable the rest of the day. And sometimes it can be something, as you may have experienced, someone will say something to you, they walk off and they're fine, and you're the one who's feeling upset the rest of the day, right? So that's what we want to avoid, is that why should I give my power up to someone else and allow that to upset me the whole rest of my day or even longer when they've probably forgotten about it? So the first thing is, I say, it doesn't do anything to me. That's the beginning mantra, right? Whatever they say or do, whatever's happening or doing, it doesn't do anything to me. And the second thing is, everything is exactly how it should be. So if something's not happening the way it is, and there's many things in our lives that of course we wish were different right now. A lot of things, you know, who wants to be stuck with this pandemic? Who wants to be feeling the way they're feeling right now? You know, maybe you'd want to have, you know, more money, more height, more whatever things in our lives we feel like we have absolutely no control over, we get upset. And so the second mantra is, everything is how it should be. Everything has happened from a causality of the universe, and I cannot change that. So to say that anything should be a different way is to basically say that the universe is not in order, and that my order is the proper order of the universe. Like you know, my father passed 2 years ago, and I feel it incredibly unfair. And it's a very negative thought process that brings me nowhere to keep getting upset about it, because I can't control it. As much as I think it's not fair, that will eat me up inside if I keep going down that pathway of saying, how come, why, because I can't make that decision. I have to understand that this is beyond me. So if you imagine if every single human being out there had the power to bend the universe to their will, we'd be in a shit ton of trouble. if everybody was making things happen the way they wanted to. You'd suddenly have 8 million people going up to the lotto saying, hey, I won, because we all were supposed to win. It's just not going to happen. So the second thing is a release and saying that everything is how it should be, even if it's something that's unhappy, unpleasant, painful in some way, is how it should be. The third one is all humans will make mistakes. When I expect people to behave as I would, when I expect that people are going to do the right thing, what I believe to be the right thing all the time, I'm going to be miserably disappointed all the time. But when I am in the reality of understanding as a counteraction to these thoughts that everyone is going to make a mistake, I'm not going to be disappointed. I may be disappointed in myself that I've chosen to trust a person and think that they're going to behave the way I was hoping they would be. But if I understand that even myself am fallible, then how much does that ease those thoughts? Again, this isn't about not having painful feelings or not having emotions when something happens. Of course, we're going to. The difference is, should I be having emotions that are equivalent to what's happening right now because of my experience, or am I having emotions beyond what's happened because now all my irrational thoughts have kicked in and I'm reliving it, or I'm reproducing it, or I'm just going through this over and over again and it's causing me pain and suffering? Whereas, can I look at it and can I take whatever thought? So, when you look at these 6 rules I'm going to give you, go back and you're going to think about something in your life and then put it up against these 6 rules and say, does it hold true to these rules? And if I apply these rules, can I then take away the emotions that I've been harboring because of it? So, let's see. So number 4, conflict. All conflict requires a minimum of 2 parties. And there's a 30% rule. The 30% rule is that any party of the conflict has to contribute at least 30% of their energy to keep the conflict going. Someone has to be putting the energy in there to keep it going. So if there's a conflict, you can't have a conflict with just one person. I was talking to somebody the other day, and she was saying to me that her partner was just saying all this irrational stuff to her that was just getting her really upset. And I said to her, well, what would happen if you just agreed with the person's feelings? Not with that they were right, but just agreed with their feeling. Somebody's coming to you and they're saying, well, I'm really upset because you keep leaving, you keep doing this, you keep doing that, or, I don't like when you say that. And you say, okay, well, I understand how you would feel and I understand how that would upset you. I'm sorry to hear that. How are you going to argue with that? We're going to say, yes, I'm sorry too. Yes, it is upsetting. You kind of diffused it at this point. So there has to be an energy we keep involving into it to continue a conflict. So if we've let go of it, if we've released ourselves from it, there's really no conflict anymore. Now it's something that the other person may be harboring, but I'm not involved in a conflict because I've released that. So understanding that I have to put my energy into something to continue the conflict. In my own life, I have my stepmother. She's whatever she is, whatever her issues are, whatever her challenges are. She's, tried her best to cause a lot of pain and suffering. And at this point, she doesn't exist for me in my life anymore. I've eliminated. If I continue to think about it, I'm continuing the conflict because I'm just thinking about it and it's causing me pain. But if I've released that and I say, okay, well, that happened to a different part of my life and that doesn't belong to me anymore. I now no longer hold that conflict, nor have I given my power up to her for her to be upsetting me about it. So something may happen and it may be causing pain and we move on from it. We say, okay, I'm done with that. Now I will move forward. The next one is the original cause. Okay, whatever has upset you, whatever has happened, the original cause is now lost in the past. It's in antiquity, it's in history. it is a waste of time for us to search for the original cause or who did what first. And the best, and this, if we do this, will constantly bring up chronic emotion, chronic pain. So the best strategy is to take now and move forward. So I look at it, so am I really going to sit down and try and figure out, well, why is this happening? Why did they do this? Or, who said what first? And why did, were they the one who did it? Or, what does it matter? It's all history and it's done. And at this point, history only exists as often as I choose to go back and continue to think about it. As long as I keep remembering it in whatever way I remember it, which of course is from my own perspective, I'm just bringing out those emotions over and over again. I'm just causing myself my own pain from it. It doesn't matter at this point. Even if the other person, let's say, was 100% wrong and they did everything incorrectly and caused me suffering, what does that do for me now? Is history. I have to let that part go and change. And my only strategy is to change my behaviors now moving forward. And the last part, which is what we talked about in the beginning, is, and I love this expression, it is, we feel the way we think. We feel the way that we think. So whatever I'm thinking is what's bringing about my feelings. Events are not what are causing my emotions. It's my interpretation of those events that cause my emotions. So I'm feeling whatever I'm thinking. If I'm thinking that I'm not good enough, I'm going to feel worthless. If I'm feeling like the universe is unfair, I'm going to feel helpless. If I'm thinking that something bad's going to happen, I'm going to be anxious. So all of it is broken down by my thinking. And this is where we have to make that change. So the way that we analyze those events that happen are by presenting it with these 6 rules and saying, now, how can I go back? How can I look at this event so that I can change my thinking about it and therefore release any negative emotions? So something happens, I take that event and I say, okay, does this do anything to me? No, it's an event. It does nothing to me unless I interpret it as such that it must do something to me. 2, everything is exactly how it should be. If I fight against this principle, if I say it's not fair, it shouldn't be like this, it can't be this way, then I'm only causing myself more suffering and pain because I'm fighting against the causality of the universe. Number 3, humans make mistakes. If I don't believe that anybody can make a mistake, or if they do make a mistake, then it's the worst thing that happened, or if I make a mistake, it's the worst thing that happened, again, I'm going to bring myself into negative emotions. I must be accepting of the fact that it's going to happen like that, and people are going to be that way. Now, I don't need to necessarily keep that person in my life, but I can recognize that being angry about it or being upset isn't going to help me. Conflict. If there's a conflict, I have to recognize that I have to be involved in it at least 30% to continue that conflict. If I remove my involvement in it, the conflict dissipates, because I can't have a conflict with myself. One person can't have conflict. Nextly, do I need to search? Am I trying to figure out, am I going back in the past and digging and trying to find the cause of all these things? Am I going back and playing past events and re-upsetting myself about it? Or can I say, okay, whatever happened, I've experienced that, and I have the knowledge that I don't want that again, and I move forward. And lastly, am I thinking the way that I want to feel about this? Whatever I'm thinking, are those the kinds of thoughts I want to have to create the feelings that I desire? So as we understand now that event, thoughts about it, and then emotions, these emotions can be changed by changing our thoughts, we now start to understand that I can look at events in a different way. And so I really hope that you can take this and really try to think about some events, just as a practice, first of all, events that have happened, and then take the homework, which is again the same sort of thing, to look at the events and then to put it up against these rules, and then ask myself, okay, how can I now deal with these things? Because there's still going to be challenges, right? We're still going to have people in our lives who are going to say things to us and make us unhappy, or let us down in ways that we feel they should have acted differently, or events that happen that can cause us major distress. But the choice is, how much time and energy am I going to give to it? How much am I going to allow that to affect my own psyche emotionally, and my body physically, and even my spirit, if I let those things rule how I am feeling? So the emotions I have are my choice because of how I'm going to interpret the event that occurs. And this is your chance to reinterpret those events by looking at these 6 rules and deciding how I'm going to counteract these behaviors. If I can keep these in my brain, if I can hold on to these, if I can remember these rules and start to apply it to every event that happens, I now am releasing or letting go of so much of that emotion, because now it doesn't have to affect me in that way. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Don. What's up?
We do this at the time of the event, after all the conditioning we've had?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is what we're trying to do now. I mean, when you sit down in the week and you're thinking about it like as a homework, you'll think about past events and ask yourself how you can apply these rules to those past events. But if you can keep track of this and you move forward, then absolutely, it's in that moment that you want to be able to then stop yourself from going down that path, because there has to be that connect, there has to be that thought process. And of course it takes time, because this is a habit of a lifetime of reactions that we've had to experiences. You know, like for example, for myself, I was talking to my husband the other day, and he said, I'm trying to remember what it was. He said something to me. This is how good I am, is I just already deleted it from my brain. But he said something to me the other day. It was something like the way he said it was, I know he didn't mean it that way. He was asking me to do something, but it felt like very commanding when he said it. And he was like, you should go do this, or whatever it was. And even if it was 100% right and true and helpful, the immediate reaction in my brain was, go do the opposite. Just go do the opposite. And, going back, I know that from my childhood, I was, critiqued a lot, and I would, felt like I didn't have a lot of power, and people were telling me what to do, and I didn't want to do that. And there was so much pressure that it was this kind of knee-jerk reaction to want to just go and do the opposite. So when I could look at it and understand from that moment and say, okay, you know what? There's words that have just been spoken to me, and I hear that, but this doesn't have to do anything to me. This doesn't have to cause me emotion. And I can just take a break from it for a moment and look at it and say, okay, you're saying this to me right now. I stopped for a second and said, do I want to have an emotion about it? And I thought, no. And then when I really thought about it, I thought, actually, that's probably a good idea. And I said, okay. And I just went and I did the thing. And it was hard, because my original feeling would be like, no, I'm going to do the opposite. Don't you tell me what to do. It could be anything. So it is a practice. Whatever it is that speaks to you in that moment, it's not going to be all 6, because they're all dealing with different things. So it can be any of those things that you have to click into in that moment. Somebody can be absolutely horrendous in a moment and looking at you and saying something awful, and you can look at them and choose to want to get upset and say, how dare they talk to me? Or you can look at the idea that everyone's making mistakes and is fallible, and there's probably some misery in this person's life for him to behave that way. So you can just be looking at it and saying, okay. You remember there was the time I told you the story about the woman in the store who started screaming at me because I was too close to her, and even though I had a mask, and she thought she was going to die, whatever it was, and she just got her spray out, was like, don't come near me, I will spray. I mean, I physically, my heart, I was just like, what is happening? But in that moment, I just looked at her and I just thought, this woman is unwell. This woman is really unwell, and I do not know what's happening. Where in any other situation, I could have chosen to interpret that as, she's attacking me, how dare she speak to me that way, and I'm going to talk back to her and put her in her place. So that would have been a choice, to have lost my own power in that moment and to have risen up to that place of anger, where I chose to look at as okay, this person is fallible, she's going to make a mistake, this is a huge mistake, and I do not want to be in this conflict right now. So I will remove myself from the conflict and just watch this in horror and slight amusement. And that was, my choice. And then people came, and they took me and they said, here, come to this line and go away. But it was an opportunity for an escalation, absolutely. And that's something that we evolve in when we understand that when we escalate a situation, when we're in an involvement with somebody and we're fighting with them, and now we're yelling and we're screaming and we're getting angry, and now we're saying nasty words back. It's all because at that moment we've chosen to say, well, that person made me angry, and that's why I'm saying it. That person didn't make me angry. That person just said something. And in my self-talk, I decided I'm going to say something back because one of these things. People shouldn't talk to me that way. No one should be unfair. It's not right, whatever it is. And all those things I decided. In that moment, I said, okay, now that gives me permission to go back at them. At the end of the day, what have I done? I've upset myself more than probably they have been, because I've gotten into that conflict and I've let them allow myself to get to that behavior. So is a practice, is a really big practice, because we're not going to be perfect. Again, we're all going to make mistakes. We're never all going to be perfect at this. But the more often that we can take that other road where we can stay in our place of peace, then the less likely that we're going to go down that pathway. And if it's not even, let's say, a place of anger, it may be for our own selves, a place of despair or helplessness or anxiety or depression. And all of that happens. You don't just have an event and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I'm depressed. It doesn't occur like that. An event has to happen, and then we have to start interpreting it and get that place. How do we get to that place of despair or depression? I'm never going to find somebody else. Oh, I'm not good at this. Why are these things happening to me? Everyone takes advantage of me. Why are people hurting me? How could somebody do this to me? Blah, 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 blah. What did I do wrong? Why am I being punished? What have I let into my life? Like, those are the self-speak that eventually creates that emotion, because you can't be thinking all those awful things and then walk away feeling like, okay, I feel great now. You're going to walk away feeling miserable, because we feel the way we think. So let's try now and assess, what are the 6 points? What are those 6 rules? And how can I apply that now to the events that are happening? And if I can apply it in a positive way, if I can look at it and change how I think about it, I can walk away choosing to have a much higher emotion. And I will tell you what, I will take anything over bad. Like, I'm not saying you got to walk away feeling great, but if you can feel rather than feeling then that's a step in the right direction. If I can feel mildly upset rather than deeply depressed, okay. If I can feel a little worried rather than incredibly anxious and overwhelmed, good direction. So it's all a process, moving ourselves in the right direction, having less of that emotional connection to these things from the irrational thoughts. Make sense?
Yes. The second part of this would be, even if you can't do it in the moment and you come away with a negative emotion, if you then sit down and reevaluate, go through the 6, you don't have to continue the negative emotion.
Absolutely, I believe that. That's an excellent, way to say, because again, this is about continuing on. Because where we get really into the deeper parts of it is when we continue to think about it. We replay it over and over in our minds, and we get upset about it over and over again.
So we could catch it then.
And there's another section too. And I'm thinking, so for our next Sunday, what I'd like to do is to actually do a part 2 of this. And the part 2 of this is how to take an irrational thought and to completely dispute it. And it's a number of different steps, but I think that it helps a lot, especially when we look at evidence. If there's evidence for it, if there's evidence against it, we go through and we think about, do I deserve suffering? Should I not suffer through this? What good may occur if it happens or doesn't happen? This is all sort of an analysis that we can do. And I think it might be helpful to do it in the next class, because it's a lot. But starting off with these first 6, I think is a good basis, because then I can start to say, okay, sometimes it can be just this one little thought that we have that makes such a big difference. I mean, just the thought of being able to say, you know what? I don't have to be affected by that. That can be just hugely freeing in that moment, because again, it's just something that we've learned. Like, well, if somebody says something horrible to me, I should get angry, right? I should be upset. But what if the option is I actually don't have to be affected by it? That somebody can say something and it's so meaningless to me that it doesn't affect me in any way. You know, okay, you can have your thought, you can have your feeling. Just as a funny little story to finish on, my husband and I, before we had the session today, we went to Walmart to, I wanted to get a tomato plant, because my tomato plant, my little puppies, they kind of were playing outside and they knocked it over, and I thought I could bring it together and heal it, but she didn't heal, she died. So I said, all right, let's get a new tomato plant. So I was already kind of out in the garden, and I'm in, you know, I've got my shorts and my shirt, and I'm a little, you know, kind of muddy. And I said, all right, let's go. And he looks at me and he says, are you going to go like that? And I said, I'm going to Walmart. I said, are we really going to be worried about my fashion sense at Walmart? And he said, I really think you should change. I said, I'm not going to change. I said, because I'm going to go get another plant and I need more soil. I'm already dirty. I'll probably get more dirty. I said, no, I'm going to go like this. And he just said, oh, he said, you Americans, I can't believe you're going to go to the store like that. And I thought to myself, well, this is a perfect example of that. I have zero interest in what anyone else is thinking, or especially judging. And I said, I think we're going to be okay. And the funny thing is we get to Walmart, and there's a line now because it takes some time for people to come in and out before you go. And I'm standing there, and there was no joke. There was a fellow who came towards us, and he had a very long beard, and he had what looked like a Santa hat on, and he was wearing a windbreaker and camouflage shorts and a hot pink shirt underneath and boots. And I looked at him and I looked at my husband and I said, I think I'm okay if he's going to wear that. I think we've reached the bar of what's acceptable for Walmart. I think we're good. So, you know, again, is all of that, right? This is a choice. He really is. And he's grown up in a culture that is very, very much like everyone is judging and looking and talking about each other. And so for him, an event happens, you go somewhere, somebody looks at you, and now it's like, oh, why are they looking at me? What are they thinking? What are they saying? And it brings him to a place of anxiety because he's really thinking about this event as if it matters, where me, if anyone's looking, I don't care. I don't even think about it. So that's really where we break down and we understand how much an event happens, and then I'm choosing what I'm going to feel about it. For us, it may seem like it doesn't make sense because we don't care. It's not even something we think about. But it's a conditioning that he's gone through where it's like, oh my gosh, you just don't go to any store with dirt on your hands or with, you know, not appropriate attire, no matter what it is. So again, you know, this is why it's a habit and something it takes time to change, because it's what we've you know, acknowledged so much in our life. But if you can do this, I'm telling you, it's so powerful. You're going to be able to walk away just being in a place of peace so much more, because it's just not upsetting to you. And I watch people say, aren't you upset by that? And I'm like, no, I'm honestly not. Like, I really don't care. It doesn't affect me. They want to be upset, that's fine, but that's not what I'm choosing to feel in this moment. Do we always make a choice, like you said, in the moment? No, sometimes we get upset, but I don't have to continue on. I could maybe get upset for a minute and then let it go and then move past it. Whereas I could also ruminate for days and days and make myself more upset, right?
Yeah.
So let's take this and let's try this out and see how you do this week. You know, take an event, think about it, or anything that may occur, and try to apply the 6 points to it. And, you know, and ask yourself, are those thoughts, are these irrational thoughts that I hold true? And like I said, if anybody wants to take the assessment, we can even discuss it, you know, next Sunday as well, or in private if anyone wants to share it with me. You know, we can look at how it works. So anyone else have any questions? We're all good? I know we went a little over on time, but this is a complicated topic.
Email over those questions.
Sorry, say again?
You email over the 6.
Yes, I will send it to you, absolutely. And if you want, you can also have a copy of the recording of this right now, and then you can listen to it again if that's more helpful as well. But yes, I will send over email to anybody who wants it of the 6 steps, as well as if you'd like to do the assessment with the little check boxes, we can do that too, and I'm happy to send that to you as well. Sound good?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining me. I hope it was very helpful, and I look forward to you all finding your ways to stay in your place of peace, because trust me, you will be challenged, But do your best to stay in your peace this week, okay? Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.